guys, Jo here with another video from Time for Tea Designs. This video, as usual, has been edited from our Facebook Live, which was Thursday night this week, and we used one of the new stamp sets, the Fairy Garden stamp set. So I actually made a project that I'd started or I'd prepared for the Create and Craft show that we did this week, but I didn't get a chance to demonstrate. So I'd already stamped out some of my little fairy images, but I also stamped out a few of the accessories here so that we could complete the card. You can see at the top of the screen there that those were the images that I prepared for the show. So I pre-coloured and fussy cut those and just put them on some foam pads just to make things a little bit quicker while we were on air. So I will use those later on, but one of the questions that I'd had this week was around my colouring. So I just wanted to spend a little bit more time today just talking you through a little bit of colouring. So I've not sped this part up quite as much, although I have made it a little bit faster than real time, just so that this video isn't super long. The Facebook Live event was about an hour and 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. So it's quite a long video in real time. So to make this a little bit more watchable, I have sped things up a little. So I'm starting with my fair-skinned girl here, and you can see the colours that I've used at the top of the screen. And when we move on to the fairy with the darker skin tone, I'll just talk you through how I've created the dimension on her face and on her clothing, but I'm just explaining here where some of my highlights would be and where I'm imagining my sun to be, which is what will determine where my highlights are. So one of the things that I sometimes do is draw myself a little sun where I imagine the light coming from, so that at whatever point in me colouring the image, I can be reminded of where that sunshine and that highlight should be. So for in this the first example, my light was to the left hand side, but for this example my light is going to be coming from the right hand side because I imagine her looking up at the sun. So the majority of the light will be on the top of her face and her arms, and on the portions of her body that are closest to the sun. So I've gone in with my lightest shade first, and then adding a little bit of a mid-tone, the E13, to add a little bit of dimension in the areas that we spoke about there. So anything that's underneath anything else, blending that out with my E15, and then going back in with the lightest shade again, so that I smooth out all of those lines. I'm using the R32 to add a little bit of blush to the cheeks, and one of the things that I would recommend here is that you add that colour before the previous colours have fully dried. If you let those colours dry, then when you apply the R32 it will bleach out the colour and you won't get a nice blend. So while the colour and the paper is still saturated, that's when I would recommend going in with your blush colour. For the dress, I've gone in with my R35 and R37 and just put one layer of the R35 down and then added some shading towards the bottom. And then because these are very small areas, I am just going in with one colour for the little shoes, and just using the two colours for their dresses. So a little bit of the YG23 there, and the YG25 to add a little bit of shading. For their wings, I'm using some really pale shades of pink and mint, so just applying a little bit of a pale RV 000 and then the RV 14, I think that was, that I used to add a little bit more pink. And for the other girls' wings, the other fairies' wings, I'm using the BG
10 and the BG11. And I will add a few little dots to those wings just to add a little bit more of an interest, just so that they look a little bit sparkly before we've even added any extra glitter like we did in the example that I used on the TV. I had a bit of stickles to add some shimmer to those wings, which looks really pretty. So for the hair, this again is something that is worth practicing. I use a slightly different technique for the hair, more of a flicking motion, so some small short flicking motions. I'm again layering down my lightest colour first, but then I will, again using that same positioning of the sun, add some darker flicks to that hair, creating a little bit of a parting and giving the illusion of some strands of hair. So I won't fully blend out all of my strokes here because I want to be able to see some of those lines, because that is what indicates those hair strands. So using my darkest colour, I've gone back in to deepen that parting, and again using those very small flicking motions to create those the illusion of those hair strands, and just adding that darkest colour wherever I feel there might be shadow. So I've left the top of the curl, the midsection and the crown as very pale, and I'm not going to fully blend all of those out because I don't believe that that's necessary when you're trying to create texture of this kind. So just adding a few more flicks there to add in that texture, and that's pretty much our brunette complete. So I did want to show just how I'd used my brush to create some of those flicking motions. So you can see here I'm just using some long light strokes and there's some thicker strokes, and by creating that flicking action and that gradient, you create a softer edge to anything that you're trying to colour, and that softer edge that you create means that you're able to get a better blend when you apply your second colour to those areas. So for our blonde girl, I'm using the same principle, those same flicking motions with my with the very tip of my brush. The Copic markers are really good to be able to get that because they've got a soft nib. So again, I would recommend these markers for anybody who is trying to develop their colouring skills. So I'm using a combination of Y21, Y19, Y26 and Y28, and this is a new combination that I've come across, and I feel that this gives a really nice natural but goldeny look to blonde hair. Obviously there are a number of different shades of blonde to your cool shades or warmer shades, and I think this combination creates a really nice warm shade of blonde. For the Toadstool then, I've moved on to doing a traditional red for the top of the Toadstool. It's the same reds that we've used in the dress for one of the fairies, so this keeps a continuity of colour scheme, even though there are quite a few colours within our figures there. If I'm using a number of colours, I like to mix and match them across each of those figures and those characters so that there is some unity between them. So I'm going to use some warm greys to colour the base of my Toadstool, and some to just add a little bit of shading to the white patches on the mushroom and to my chimney. So again, using very small little flicking motions to add some shading with a mid-tone, and then going in with a really small line of the dark tone underneath where that Toadstool is and then just to the base as well, so that you can see there is a little bit of dimension. And like I mentioned before, those tiny little flicks mean that you have a softer edge, so when it comes to blending those areas out, as I'm doing here, that's much easier and you get a much softer blend. So now I'm moving on to colouring in the rest of my toadstool, and I'm really sorry, but for some reason my camera position had altered during the recording, and my image is just going slightly out of shot there, but I'm using the same green that I used in the middle fairies dress, and then some of my Y21, my Y19 to just add a little bit of warmth to the windows, and then the BG 32 just around the outside of my my door there, the little stones outside the door. So now I have all my characters and my elements coloured up. I'm moving on to my background. So I'm using the Sunny Side Up stencil, which I am afraid has sold out, but we are looking to restock this because we've had a lot of requests for it. And we're also bringing out a brand new stencil shortly that has some of the fun elements that are part of this stencil, so look out for that. But in the meantime, I've just used one area of that. If you've already got your stencil, then please do you know, get that used, because it's a great stencil, really useful. And I'm just applying some shades of Distress ink to my sky. So the shades that I've used across the grass are my Twisted Citron and Crushed Olives, and now I'm using Squeezed Lemonade, Worn Lipstick and Abandoned Coral to create the background, and I'm blending this directly onto my card panel. So this is one of our A6 top folding card blanks, but is on a landscape orientation. I'm using one of the beautiful blender brushes, well, a couple of those actually, to help me achieve this lovely airbrushed effect that we've got there. And then I'm going to add a few splatters with some white acrylic paint. So I've just watered a little blob of paint down, and you can see here that I was alerted to the fact that I wasn't quite in shot. So I have moved my card a little bit so that you can see more clearly what I'm doing. And I'm just using my brush across the edge of my paint palette there to add a few splatters of paint to my background. And I just think that creates a really pretty effect. So I'll pop that to one side to let that dry. I had prepared a background for the show on Monday, so I have that. And I also had cut out a frame from our Smile frame and sentiment die set. So that's the frame there, just cut out of some white cardstock. And I'm going to use that to help me figure out where I need my sentiment to go. So I need to make sure that there is enough room for all of the sentiment and that frame to go around the outside. So the sentiment that I'm going to use is the Have a Fairy Happy Birthday. We love a pun here at Time for Tea. So so I think that the sentiments in this set are really cute. We have Thank You Very Much, or I Love You Very Much. We have the Have a Very Fairy Happy Birthday as well. So just really nice sentiments that you can use for lots of different occasions. And I'm going to heat emboss this with some white embossing powder. So I've used my anti-static bag on the background there first, and then stamped with some Wow embossing ink. And now I'm using my Wow bright white embossing powder to add to that ink. And I'm going to apply some heat with my heat tool. And you can see there that that's made for a really nice bright white sentiment. So now that that's the sentiments completed, I can add my frame, and I've added that to my card base using some shaker tape. This is the perfect frame size to create a shaker card, so I didn't do that on this occasion, but actually it is a great shape for that. And now I'm just thinking about where I can position each of my elements. So I didn't do this as part of this demonstration, but I have added the little wand, the cupcake and the present to the fairies' hands, so they're positioned so that we can carry each of these little elements. And I've also coloured up one of the little ladybirds and a little butterfly as well. So I'm just trying to figure out quite where I want to put all of these bits. There are a couple of flowers that I decided to add, and I'm using a combination of liquid glue and foam pads just to add some dimensions. So for this particular flower I've added quite a thick foam pad, and then I've just used liquid glue to add the second little flower on top. And then my butterfly will also be flat to the card with some liquid glue, so that it seems like it's further in the background. Each of my fairies are all on foam pads, so they sit more proud of the frame, and I felt like that front blondie fairy needed a little bit more dimension, so I've added an extra foam pad to the back of her head so that sits forward a little bit more. The finishing touch was to add some of my Nouveau crystal drops to the cupcake and to the centre of those flowers, and to my ladybird, and that just gave a little bit more shine and dimension to those elements. You can see in the final cards here that I'd added some of those stickles as well to the fairies' wings, which really looks very pretty and is an excuse to crack open your glitters and your stickles. I really hope that you enjoyed the tutorial today. If you did, it'd be great if you could like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can always join us every Thursday night at 8 o'clock on Facebook for a live crafting tutorial with myself and Ant. Thanks ever so much for watching today, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye bye now.